Picture this. It's Christmas 2008, and a 5-year-old boy just received the greatest gift imaginable, a Nintendo Wii. A gift that would change his life forever. Now, as I'm sure you can guess, that young boy was in fact me. The Wii was such an important part of my childhood, not only providing endless fun through my younger years and providing many timeless classics that I still replay to this day, but also being the beginning of my greatest passion, and for that the Wii will always hold a special place in my heart. The system not only saved Nintendo, but it went against the grain trying to focus exclusively on fun, quality titles, instead of trying to be the most powerful system on the market. I know the Wii touched the hearts of many, but the vast majority of Wii owners just use it for Wii Sports or Mario Kart, and they missed out on its golden library of incredible titles. So let's take a look at the Wii, and why it was such a great system, and what made it so successful. So to put the Wii into perspective, we need to look at how we got here. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Nintendo was king in the gaming industry. While yes, they did have a serious competitor in Sega's Mega Drive, almost all systems which merely attempted to oppose Nintendo in the home console or handheld market got smoked. Then came Sony.
Can we have your full name and your title, please?
I'm Phil Harrison, Director of Product Development for Sony Computer Entertainment.
Excellent. Now tell us about the PlayStation. What is it? What does it do?
Okay, here at ECTS we're launching the Sony PlayStation, which is our entrance into the next generation video game marketplace.
What's that?
Mamma mia!
Nintendo was originally going to work with Sony to create the Nintendo PlayStation, but the problem came from Nintendo favouring proprietary cartridges, whereas Sony wanted to use CDs for their games. This eventually led to the partnership falling apart, and Sony feeling somewhat burned by Nintendo. They fueled this energy and made their own PlayStation a reality without Nintendo's backing, and it was a huge success. Releasing in December 1994, the PS1 was a phenomenon. Not only was Nintendo's new system, the N64, not out yet, Nintendo was arrogant enough to assume that people would wait for a Nintendo 64 instead of buying a PlayStation. But Nintendo thought wrong. Even when the Nintendo 64 did eventually release in 1996, it was severely limited by multiple factors. First off, the cartridges Nintendo went with severely limited the size and scope of games on the system compared to Sony's discs, which could store a much larger volume of data. This meant that not only were many games limited in scope compared to certain PS1 games, it also meant that the third-party support for the system was non-existent, as pre-existing PS1 games couldn't fit on the cartridges, and developers didn't want to limit their own games to a smaller file size, especially when the PlayStation had such a big install base already. Also, the first-party game output was irregularly slow for Nintendo this generation, as developers were still adjusting to working with the new hardware, making the PlayStation seem a much more appealing choice to new gamers at the time. This all led to Sony kicking Nintendo off of its pedestal and taking the throne for themselves. This success didn't stop either, as Sony's PlayStation 2 held that momentum and somehow sold even more than the PS1 did, becoming the best-selling console of all time. To combat Sony, Nintendo released their GameCube, the most powerful console at the point of its release, with a focus on just making pure quality games. Nintendo made the move to discs, sort of. They went with mini discs, which held a lot more data than a cartridge could, but still fell so far short of what Sony was doing with its PS2 games, meaning a lot of the same issues were still present. With this generation, Microsoft also threw their hat into the ring with the Xbox, which pushed Nintendo into third place. It was clear to Nintendo that they couldn't compete in the power race anymore, so they needed to try something different. That's how we ended up with the Wii. Nintendo wanted to give the GameCube hardware another chance, and with so many GameCube games currently in development or primed for re-release, Nintendo opted for a much less powerful machine than the Xbox 360 and PS3 to focus on co-op party games and gimmicky motion controls. Look, it's a lot better than it sounds, I promise. At a first glance, the console might not look like much, but I've always appreciated its sleek and modern design a lot more than something like the fat PS3. The system is compact and versatile, and it's very easy to integrate into a TV setup. Unfortunately, the Wii only supports an AV out, compared to the HDMI of its competition. This wasn't a huge issue at the time, but composite cables look so bad on modern HD TVs, so this kinda sucks now. This problem is easily remedied by using a third-party HDMI adapter on Amazon and some tweaking. The launch model Wii has these two flaps on top which enable GameCube backwards compatibility natively, with no emulation. There are ports for the controllers and memory cards. This is one of the Wii's biggest strengths, and a big reason why it remains relevant today. My one complaint with this is the lack of internal memory card emulation, like what they have with the PS1 and PS2 games on the PS3, as it is a bit annoying to have to be restricted to the small storage sizes of the memory cards and to have the memory cards sticking out awkwardly at all times, especially when there is an internal SD card slot which could be used for storing these save files. This system has a full-size disc drive, as Nintendo made the jump to full-size DVDs with this console, but the disc drive does also support GameCube mini discs, of course. Sadly, all GameCube support was cut from later models later in the life cycle as a cost-cutting measure. Alongside the console comes the Wiimote. This controller is a breakaway from the traditional controller design, but it's almost like the Swiss Army knife of gaming. It has a D-pad, 3 front buttons, utility buttons, 1 back trigger, and an IR sensor. The IR sensor detects the position of an IR sensor bar which you place below the TV, allowing for a pointer to appear on screen and track your movements. This controller can be used vertically for motion controlled or pointer based minigames, or on its side like an NES controller for games like New Super Mario Bros. Wii. These two things on their own don't sound like a lot, but then you have this port on the bottom of the controller which allows for so many more possibilities. Through this you can use the controller in combination with a nunchuck which adds a joystick and 2 extra shoulder buttons. This is usually the best control scheme for Wii games, as you get most of the traditional controller alongside support for the IR pointer and motion controls. You can also connect a Classic Controller or Classic Controller Pro for a more traditional experience, although this wouldn't always be supported. As the Wiimote was my first controller, I never really felt the departure from the norm that this was, but it did feel magical to use growing up. The Wii left me with a love for motion controls in games, as they always felt so immersive and fun to me as a kid. I always appreciate these features more than most, I feel, as a lot of people seem to have gotten sick of them by now. Later down the line, Nintendo released the Wii Motion Plus accessory, which offered improved motion controls required for certain games. With each console came a set of TV-like channels or applications. These and your disc game were accessible via the home menu, which was themed around old TV stations and how you cycle through them. It's a pretty standard UI at the end of the day, but I really like its aesthetic and simplicity. It's very easy to navigate, visually pleasing, and has the most iconic menu music of all time. The Wii channels have everything you need, from the disc channel to the weather channel to the everybody votes channel to the Mii Maker. You could access the Wii Shop channel to download more channels and a full library of WiiWare and Virtual Console games, though this service, along with most online content, has now been shut down. Now, as I just mentioned, there is a channel shipped with every console called the Mii channel. It is here where you can make a lookalike avatar, which you use for many games throughout the Wii library. The Miis were a stroke of genius. They are simplistic yet customizable enough for people to be able to recreate themselves. These Miis were practically the face of the Nintendo brand for this generation. So many games relied on the Miis for their success, and it added a feeling of continuity between loads of games which would have otherwise felt completely isolated. The Miis were undeniably a huge factor in why the Wii was so successful. What is a console without its games? The Wii has one of the most underrated libraries in my opinion. So many incredible games are overlooked and only a select few are focused on. Now obviously I can't cover every Wii game in existence, otherwise we'd be here all year, but I'm gonna try, so here goes nothing. Let's kick this off with arguably the most iconic series on the Wii, the Wii series. Wii Sports, Wii Music, Wii Fit, Wii Party. Whilst the naming isn't exactly creative, it just works for this system where it wouldn't for any other. Like imagine Sony releasing PlayStation Music or PlayStation Sports, it just doesn't feel right. This does. These games were the perfect let's shoot the shit type games, whether it be a party with friends or a family setting. Wii Sports is obviously the most iconic, being bundled with most Wii systems. Everyone played this back in the day. 5 sports were included: boxing, golf, baseball, tennis, and my personal favourite, bowling. All of these sports were pretty basic in practice, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Their simplicity makes them accessible. This means you can go to your mum or your grandpa for once and have them be able to join in the fun. This is part of what makes the Wii so special. I can't remember another time where a console's been so geared towards getting everyone involved. In a similar vein is Wii Play, which is a pointer-based minigame collection. I'm pretty fond of Wii Play. I always liked the fishing and shooting minigames the most as a kid. Also, Wii Music was a fun one growing up, though going back to it now I admit it doesn't really have much to it. The game has charm, but other than that it's a pretty generic rhythm game, and I don't really like rhythm games. Next up is Wii Fit. This game is a pretty interesting concept, being a virtual workout with mini-games built in. I vividly remember cheating on this one by sitting on the couch and shaking the Wiimote just so I could spot all of the NES Mario sprites dotted around the map. It was a good time. Nintendo also released Wii Chess. Now I didn't know this existed until I saw Scott the Woz talk about it in one of his videos a while ago, and I have no opinion on it as I don't play chess. Finally is Wii Party. This game is essentially Mario Party with all of the Mario elements removed and all of the characters replaced with Miis. Now that doesn't sound like much, but I enjoyed revisiting this game quite a bit as Board Game Island is a really fun and unique feeling mode. This game feels different enough from Mario Party to make it worthwhile in my opinion. A couple of these games got updated versions to add features and support for the Motion Plus accessory for improved motion. Most major Nintendo IPs got a good amount of attention on this system. As expected, Mario has the most, with multiple mainline entries and spin-offs to boot. Super Mario Galaxy kicked things off in 2007, followed up by Galaxy 2 in 2010. These are two of my favourite games of all time. Both games are quite distinct, with Galaxy being more similar to Mario 64 for the most part, with a big hub world and more larger, expansive levels which you revisit multiple times, and Galaxy 2 having less of that in favour of more linear levels. The level design is excellent across both games, with so many memorable and replayable stages. Mario controls very smoothly across both games, with the spin dash, which is unique to these titles, adding a lot of new opportunities for interesting platforming. They also hold up very well visually, not looking out of place among recent Switch releases. The highlight though is definitely the incredible soundtrack. Every single track is a banger, from Gusty Garden Galaxy to Freeze Flame Galaxy to Yoshi Star Galaxy. The Grand Orchestra adds to the already amazing space theme. It just makes every galaxy and every Power Star just feel so powerful. Alongside these two games came New Super Mario Bros. Wii. New Super Mario Bros. Wii was the first game I properly played through, and is pretty much responsible for my love of gaming to this day. I have so many fond memories using the propeller suit and penguin suit to blitz through the stages, or playing 4-player co-op with my family on New Year's Eve. This game will always have a special place in my heart. Now, nostalgia notwithstanding, the game isn't perfect. Unlike the Galaxy series, unless you have a connection to this game, there isn't much differentiating it from other new 2D Mario games. Not only this, the level design also feels a bit simple a lot of the time, as each stage has to be optimised for 4-player co-op, which hampers the single-player experience quite a bit, as most of the levels can be beaten by a literal fetus first try, making it pretty boring to revisit unless again you are someone like me who loves the shit anyway because you're nostalgia blind. I will say though, the game isn't all bad. Despite being really easy, the bosses have some interesting moves, paying homage to their original appearances. I also really enjoy the soundtrack and art design, as it feels so clean and polished. This game was the first home console 2D Mario since World, so it deserves a lot of credit for reviving the genre somewhat. 2D games have been somewhat stagnant for a while, with Metroid, Sonic, Donkey Kong and others not getting a 2D console release for some time. The new Super Mario Bros. Games reignited the genre by proving there was still a huge market for it in the modern age, and its impact still remains felt to this day. And of course, we got Mario Kart Wii. This game is pretty polarising between fans these days, but at the time it was the fucking shit. Everyone and their mother was playing Mario Kart Wii and loving it. I was one of these people. The biggest strength of this game has to be the track design. Almost every track in the game is a banger, with tracks like Coconut Mole, DK Summit, Toad's Factory and Wario's Gold Mine. This game is unrivaled in level design. I also really like the soundtrack and character selection. MK Wii is one of my favourite games in the series, but it isn't without its flaws. The item balancing is absolute cancer. You can go from first to last in approximately 4.8 milliseconds. This leads to many extremely frustrating moments. Overall though, this game is definitely a great time, and I do look back on it very fondly. Not only did Mario get 3 mainline releases and a new Mario Kart game, there were also a bunch of spin-offs released. A new Paper Mario game came out, Super Paper Mario. This game takes the RPG elements of Paper Mario and fuses them with a platformer. There is a pretty interesting mechanic where you can switch between 2D and 3D perspectives, which plays quite well on the paper gimmick of this series. Weirdly enough, I didn't actually own this game until recently, but I used to rent it from my local library as a kid, and I'd keep renewing it every week until I beat it. There were quite a few Mario sports titles released, a new Strikers, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and Mario Sports Mix. I didn't play many sports games, but I have really fond memories of playing the Olympic Games with my family. Mario Party also got 2 new entries, with 8 being a continuation of the classic Mario Party formula with some new mini-games and boards, with each player navigating the board on their own to collect stars and win, and with 9 being Mario Party 9. For some reason they decided to dumb down the gameplay to a system where players move all together instead of moving individually, meaning the gameplay is a lot less independent and competitive. I have no idea why they did this. I'd love to see the Nintendo boardroom meeting where they decided to make the fun party game, which was already pretty basic, into a linear slog. Good one, Nintendo. At least we got Mario Party 8 anyhow. Next up, Donkey Kong. This console heralded Donkey Kong Country Returns, an absolute masterpiece. This game not only managed to live up to the golden reputation of the classic DK series, but also managed to feel fresh and new. This game is a masterclass in level design, with each stage having fun and unique ideas. Also, unlike New Super Mario Bros. Wii, this game accommodates co-op but doesn't sacrifice fun and challenging levels for it. This game also maintains the art direction from the original, bringing it into the 3D era very well. There's a treasure trove of collectibles in each stage, making each level worth replaying over and over, adding a lot of value to the game. Finally, the soundtrack is great. Using a mix of remastered tracks from the original and brand new tracks, the game's soundtrack helps the tropical jungle vibe of the game, and I really enjoyed that. We also got Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. I mean, it exists. Honestly, just watch Scott's video on this for an opinion. I refuse to engage. To end all Mario related properties, Wario Land 4 was released. This game was such a standout for its gorgeous and hand-drawn art style. I don't think any other Nintendo platform has ever done something quite like this. Metroid Prime 3 also released, which was unfortunately the only Metroid game ever released on the Wii. Prime 3 is a continuation of the GameCube Classic series, translating the 2D Metroid style into an FPS, which has got to be one of the most unique spin-off ideas I have ever seen a company do. The way the Prime games managed to make an FPS feel so similar to a 2D platform has always impressed me. Pokemon also got some pretty good rep, with Poké Park 1 and 2 and Pokemon Battle Revolution. Battle Revolution is a Pokemon Stadium-esque game, but more focused around Gen 4 Pokemon as to be expected. The Poké Park games are action-adventure games where you play as Pikachu. I've only ever played the first, but I was very fond of it. This game has many vibrant environments and encourages exploration. So much content is available, be it all the unique challenges and quests, all of the mini-games, or all of the Pokemon you can go and meet. Xenoblade Chronicles also released. Next up we have Kirby. Kirby Return to Dreamland is in a similar vein to Donkey Kong Country Returns, i.e. it was a classic franchise revival with some new elements. I quite enjoyed this game, but I would not recommend rebuying it for 60 quid. Nintendo? The game is fun enough, but it suffers from a similar issue that NSMB Wii has, with so many simple and easy co-op focused stages making this game not that fun to revisit. Where it gets interesting though is Kirby's Epic Yarn. This game takes traditional Kirby and applies a handcrafted sewing aesthetic to it. This is very creatively applied throughout the game, as not only are characters and collectibles made of crafting materials, but many platforming challenges use these elements to create a knitted or crafted challenge that feels so charming. The one word I would use to describe this game is comfy. Whilst it might not be the most challenging game of all time, it is fun and unique, and for that it has my respect. Animal Crossing City Folk released in 2009, and I don't have much to say about it. It's Animal Crossing exactly as you'd expect. You go around farming, doing quests for NPCs and arranging your town. It's not a bad game by any means, I've just never been that into Animal Crossing, as I always lost motivation after playing it for a few hours. Don't get me wrong though, this is a quality game with loads of content, it's just not for me. Anyways, Smash. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was an extremely exciting game. Not only was it a follow-up to one of the greatest fighting games of all time, Super Smash Bros. Melee, but it also had Sonic and Solid Snake as advertised playable characters. That level of crossover was almost unheard of at the time, and brought even more eyes onto this game than there already were. Brawl goes for a much more gritty and realistic art style than the other Smash games. It works quite well and helps to give this game its own identity, where a game like Smash 4 would be forgotten by comparison. This game slows down or truncates a lot of what makes Melee so great, which is why I'm not a huge fan of the gameplay. But that said, it has a really fun single player campaign, excellent cast of characters and a banger soundtrack. This game was one of the pillars of the Wii, and as my first Smash game it will always have my appreciation. Finally, The Legend of Zelda. Zelda got 2 mainline entries on the Wii, one as a launch title and one near the end of its life cycle. Zelda Twilight Princess was a GameCube game which had been in development for some time before the Wii's released. It just lined up so well. Nintendo had the perfect launch title for their new system just sitting there, so they slapped it in widescreen, added motion controls and called it a day. Smart move, as if they'd just released it on GameCube, the game would have been a wasted venture for Nintendo, especially since the Wii was so near on the horizon. The game was a reactionary response to the backlash that Zelda Wind Waker received for its art style, opting to go for a really gritty and realistic art direction. This led to Twilight Princess not aging anywhere near as well as Wind Waker, but it is what fans wanted at the time, which I find quite ironic considering that Wind Waker is the much more beloved game now. This game is known for darker tone, similar to Majora's Mask, and it's really fun dungeons. I appreciate the grandiose feel that this game has, and despite me not loving the dungeons and story, I still really like what this game offers. Zelda Skyward Sword released in 2011, which begs the question, why did Nintendo not push this back to be a Wii U launch title? Am I the only one that thinks this could have seriously helped the Wii U? The Wii U launch lineup was pretty lacking, but let's say you throw Skyward Sword in there with HD and a gamepad gimmick alongside the motion controls, and that lineup suddenly looks a lot better with a Mario game and a mainline Zelda. Anyway, side tangent aside, I quite like this game. Unlike some, I am a big fan of the motion controls as they feel great to use. Unlike Twilight Princess where they replace a button input with a motion, the controls are fully designed around motion here, and I think it works really well. Also, the art style of this game transitions back into something more vibrant and colourful. It's more akin to Ocarina of Time's art style in the modern era, and focuses less on photorealism. This has worked to the game's benefit, as it has aged quite well, allowing Nintendo to sell it again in 2021 for full price. Regardless of that, this game is a good one. The dungeons are a big improvement from Twilight in my opinion, with many puzzles that use the Wiimote's unique inputs in very creative ways. Not only that, I really like the high sky aesthetic that this game goes for. So that's it for the big first party releases on the Wii. Now, whilst not every game is a perfect masterpiece, Nintendo really had a good run here. This is definitely one of their best libraries of all time. Big disc games weren't all that Nintendo released, of course. Through the Wii Shop channel, Nintendo released a series of WiiWare games. These games range from a new classic Mega Man or a mid 2D Sonic, to absolute bangers such as Snail Mail. Aha, I got it, escape game. Too fast, too noms. Enjoy your massage. Well, that's enough of that, you get the idea. This is pretty similar to the modern indie game market where for every great game there is a mountain of shovelware trash. The WiiWare definitely does have enough greats to make it worthwhile though. It adds a lot of variety to the Wii library with some more arcade-esque titles. Nintendo wasn't the only publisher working on the Wii, of course. The Wii is known for its tidal wave of shovelware trash, possibly the worst of all time. The Wii was the perfect system to offload cheaply made, low quality titles for a quick buck, especially if your game was a clone of a more popular title. The big ones were minigame collections and party games, be it a Wii Sports clone or a shitty Mario Party. These games were able to capitalise off of the popularity of the Wii series and other high quality party games, diluting the genre and damaging its image within the greater gaming community. This was a symptom of Nintendo's low level of quality control of third-party releases on their systems, which still somewhat persists to this day. Not all third-party games were bad though. In fact, a lot of studios managed to find very creative ways to bring new and existing IPs onto the Wii, taking advantage of its unique hardware. Here are some of my favourites. First off, Family Ski and Snowboard. This game was such an immersive skiing experience back in the day. The visuals were so impressive for a Wii game of this scale, and managed to fit so much into a lively ski resort within the limitations of the Wii. It is such an achievement. You use the motion controls to ski in this game, but you can also use the Wii Fit board to simulate snowboarding. Both of these control methods do work quite well, making the skiing experience a fun one. The highlight of this game is its atmosphere, be it travelling up the mountain on a ski lift or a lonely ski at night down one of the side lanes. The ambiance is amazing. This game is such a highlight because it displays a studio other than Nintendo being able to come in and take full advantage of everything unique about the Wii hardware and not being limited by its power. Another great example of this is Call of Duty. Now you're probably thinking, Call of Duty was on the Wii, and yes it was, and it was actually one of the most creative uses of the Wiimote on the system. The Call of Duty Wii ports utilise the IR pointer to allow for more precise aiming than what would be possible using the C-stick of a regular controller. These games not only manage to get such a high fidelity experience crammed onto the Wii hardware, they also offer more control options alongside that. Quite impressive, especially since COD is normally a franchise you'd associate with low effort, repetitive releases. The Sonic series also had good representation on the Wii, with 4 games, 3 of them being exclusive to the Wii. Sonic Colors is definitely my favourite of the bunch, with its theme park aesthetic defining its identity. None of these games are particularly curated towards the Wii, they just happen to be exclusive for whatever reason. Next up, the LEGO games. Since these games are pretty low fidelity, they run just fine on the Wii and are the same uncompromised versions released on the PS3 and Xbox. Whether it be Star Wars, Indiana Jones or Harry Potter, so many kids experience these franchises in the game realm for the first time on Wii. Finally, I wanted to mention the My Sims series, which took the well-known The Sims IP from EA and translated it into a kid-friendly action RPG/racing game series. I wasn't familiar with most of these games, but I did enjoy playing My Sims Agents a lot as a kid. I had a lot of fun with it. I remember really enjoying exploring all of the areas and solving all of the spy-themed puzzles. I also played My Sims Sky Heroes a little bit, but I don't remember too much about it. I haven't played these games in over a decade, but I still have a soft spot for them. This series overall was such a good fit for the Wii and makes a great addition to its library. New games weren't all that made up this system. As I mentioned before, there is a full hardware back compat with GameCube discs, but that's not all. Nintendo also released the new Play Control series, where they re-released GameCube games in widescreen with Wiimote controls. In some cases they were an improvement, such as the Pitman pointer controls and the Metroid Prime pointer shooting, or in other ways they were stupid, like in Mario Power Tennis. My biggest issue with these is that they don't support the GameCube controller, which is like literally the dumbest f***ing decision. If Wii games can support it and GameCube games are literally hardware supported, why would you not allow for a GameCube game to use the GameCube controller in these enhanced versions? That's just a classic Nintendo moment really. Nintendo sort of restarted this series for the enhanced Wii U ports for the Switch, with less focus on motion controls of course. Alongside this, many systems were available through the Virtual Console. The emulation quality varies by system, but it is damn impressive that Nintendo managed to bring everything to the Wii from NES to N64 to Sega Mega Drive. This console was a little emulation powerhouse back in the day and still somewhat is. For Mario's 25th anniversary, Nintendo released a special edition of Super Mario All-Stars for the Wii. Now, whilst a lot of people rightfully think that an SNES ROM on a disc is nothing special, I actually have a soft spot for this one, as it is the game that got me into retro gaming. Even when I was younger, it helped me see that so many old games held up so well, and that some were even better than new releases. From there I found the Virtual Console on the Wii Shop, claimed some games with free Wii points, and the rest was history. The Wii had a major impact on the modern gaming landscape, changing Nintendo's approach towards gaming to this day. This system proved to Nintendo that power isn't what's important in gaming, the games are. The Wii library is full of fun-focused experimental games which use gimmicky and creative control schemes to provide a unique experience for the player. I don't think there has been or ever will be another console quite like the Wii, especially in today's market where motion controls and so many of these experimental ideas are shunned upon for a more traditional experience. And perhaps that's not a bad thing. A lot of these experimental games are so unique on Nintendo platforms because of that. You don't see libraries on other platforms filled with games with these gimmicks that work anywhere near as well as they do on Nintendo, and if we did, they wouldn't feel so special. That doesn't mean the Wii's games didn't have impact though, because they did. Nintendo has been experimenting ever since the Wii's success, whether it be the glasses-free 3D screen on the 3DS, where the 3D effect was implemented into certain games for better or for worse, the Wii U's tablet controller which was used for many games, allowing for touch controls and the like, and the Switch's hybrid nature using the Joy-Cons as both sides of the tablet, individual Wiimote-esque controllers, a traditional controller, and individual NES controllers. None of that would have happened if the Wii hadn't been such a smash hit, even though Nintendo has toned down the gimmicks quite a bit since the Wii. That creativity is still felt to this day, and for that, I will always appreciate the Nintendo Wii. So that's all I have to say on the Wii for now. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It really helps. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.